Good evening. Good evening. I am so glad to see you all here, and a warm welcome to our friends joining us online. We have waited 3 years since our last Keenan lecture and 2 years to have our distinguished guest here. Thank you all for your patience and your resilience. My name is Brian Lewis. I have the great honor of serving as the president of Transylvania University, and it is my joy to welcome you to this event. As some of you know, the series was started back in 1985 by my distinguished predecessor and cherished friend, President Charles Shearer. The director of the Creative Intelligence series on campus has coordinated the Keenan Lecture for the last several years. So many thanks to our current director, Professor Gregory Partain, and his predecessor, Professor Zoe Strecker, for organizing this evening's occasion. As some of you veterans of these events may know, our past lecturers include notable folks such as Pulitzer Prize winning writers, distinguished novelists and historians, noted bioethicists and environmentalists, Nobel Prize winning physicists and peacemakers, the principal investigator on the Mars rover project, Academy Award nominated actors, international opera stars, eminent journalists and business executives, the first woman to serve as the president of Ireland, the highest ranking defector from the Soviet Union. But I do believe this is our first U.S. Poet Laureate. The William R. Keenan Jr. Lecture Series is funded by a grant from the William R. Keenan Jr. Charitable Trust. Now, Mr. Keenan was born in 1872 in Wilmington, North Carolina. He attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and found his passion for chemical and mechanical engineering. He later became president of the Flagler System and the Traders Paper Company and the Western Block Company, and he owned Randley Farm, which had a prized Jersey herd that was nationally known. So something of a Renaissance man. And he gave a significant portion of his estate to establishing a trust for educational purposes. After his death, the charitable trust started its formal grant-making program. The trust has focused on initiatives that improve literacy and college preparedness, contribute to community building and economic vitality, and inspire a sense of collective purpose and shared humanity. We are grateful for the generous support of the trust and for the many friends of Transylvania University who have enabled and supported this series of programs over the decades. We look forward to continuing this marvelous tradition with these unique opportunities to interact with some of the most compelling people on the planet. And to that end, I am delighted to bring to the podium the president of Transylvania's Student Government Association, Lindsay Steffen, who will introduce our distinguished visitor. Lindsay?
Good evening, everyone. So, as President Lewis was saying before, the Keenan Lectures are among Transylvania University's biggest events each year. And what a distinct honor to introduce Joy Harjo, poet, activist, and musician, for tonight's lecture. She is the first Native American United States Poet Laureate in history, serving a rare third term. Our acclaimed speaker is from the famous Creek Nation, where her great-great-grandfather was a Native American leader in the Red Stick War against President Andrew Jackson in the 1800s. The women of her family, though not poets, encouraged her creative side. Her mother wrote songs, her grandmother played the saxophone, and her aunt was an artist. As a young child, Joy Harjo struggled to speak out loud due to hurtful family experiences. In school, she began painting as a way to express herself. When Harjo entered college, she initially declared pre-med as her major of interest. However, she was deeply inspired by the art and creativity all around her. She then switched her major to art, but then changed her major again to creative writing after hearing Native American poets. In 1980, Harjo published her first full-length volume of poetry called What Moon Drove Me to This. This is the This is only the first of Harjo's many works. She went on to publish 8 books of poetry, a memoir, and 2 books for young audiences. Her distinguished work has won countless honors and awards. I can personally say that voice is a sensation that I have been considering and pondering as I have stepped into student leadership roles. Considering I too was mistaken as a mute child in school due to my fear of talking, I feel deeply connected to Harjo's inspiring academic, career, and personal path. I am slowly learning that whether your voice is soft or loud, whether you express it through writing, art, or even digital media, a strong, steady voice speaks loud and clear, breaking through the silence. I sincerely hope that Harjo's words speak to you and inspires your voice to be strong and steady as well. Please help me welcome this extraordinary woman, Joy Harjo, our keynote speaker.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you, Lindsay, for that introduction. I should say, Hinje Stongo, Joy Harjo Chifkeros, and I'm a member of Ojiabova's ceremonial grounds, the Muskogee Creek Nation. And I'm happy to be here towards the south in lands that the original peoples are Shawnee, Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Osage. So I'm honored to be here. When I flying in, looking at all those horse farms, and I have a thing for horses, so I'll probably read the poem She Had Some Horses in a while, as I have a little story that goes along with that, because the Muskogee Creek aren't known as horse people, not like the Plains people, but I had a grandfather. It was my great, I can tell you the whole line, to my great-grandmother, Katie Manahui. Her father was David Manahui, and his father was Manahui, the a Red Stick warrior who fought against Andrew Jackson. And anyway, where was I going with that? So I'm honored to be here. We were all over the South. The people are still here. When I come to a place, I know I was talking about the horse farms and how beautiful the country is looking down, and there's so much history. I was in my hotel room most of the day working because I have a lot to do, and walking over here, I mean, in just a few blocks, there's stories everywhere, all kinds of stories, and many of those stories still haven't been told. But I like to start out with honoring the original people of these lands. Those are the root cultures. I mean, if you're going to study American history, American poetry, indigenous, native poetry, history should, of course, be part of it. But we've been written out of, or basically our history, our part in this world has essentially been ignored. But there's a change. There's a change coming about. Deb Haaland, the Secretary of Interior, was my poetry student when I taught at the University of New Mexico. She was a good poet, and I think it's helped her. It's exact language, and it's fun language. I mean, some people run away from poetry and think, I don't know what it means, I don't get it. But think about some of these songs you listen to, and I always use Hotel California as an example. You just enjoy it. You don't worry about exactly what the lyrics mean. I mean, who knows what they mean? It's about something more than that. Even as the poem can be about something and move towards becoming, it's still you know, I think of poems as transformer stations. I go to them to make an exact language that will, to speak what I can't speak. That's why I think 99%, we need more poetry diversity or song diversity, because most of them are falling in love again, falling out of love, revenge poems. Yeah. We need more diversity, because there are all kinds of songs. There are songs that can help put you back together. And some of them are people's hymns. There's other, and they're all different kind of ways to approach that. Other songs to call people together, and so on. Well, I offer this one as to acknowledge those original keepers of the land and those who take care of the land, and say, Meadow, thank you. And to this beautiful earth. We are the earth. I know Woody Guthrie, and he's a wonderful songwriter. And apparently the later verse kind of counters, but it's, this land is your land. This land is my land. No, this land, we are the land. We are the land. So, and we're all in charge of taking care of we're all keepers eventually. Essentially, we're all keepers. Thank you. I make them up wherever I go, and I was thinking about how beautiful this place is and the people here, and also that spring is coming. I guess it's supposed to be here already officially. So, and somebody needs to tell spring that it is officially here. This first poem is called "For Calling the Spirit Back from Wandering the Earth in Its Human Feet." And it's a poem to kind of, sometimes we've all been through a lot. I know that it's been difficult for everyone, virtual teaching, COVID, is it over? We can take our mask off, or, I know people still getting it. Now they say there's another strain coming. And what do you do that without for 2 or 3 years? And then all of this, the racial divide and craziness that should not be there. We should be, we're human beings. And then all of the climate change, we see it. I mean, anybody that's been around too for a while, it's dramatic, the differences we've seen. political turmoil, and now maybe, is there going to be a World War III? And if there is, none of us will survive. And I think we're all on a little bit on edge. We have been for 2 years, 3 years. And this is a poem to kind of bring us all back in, and because ultimately we will all come back to the circle. And sometimes we have to remember to come back into the circle of where we are. We can lose pieces of ourselves along the way, just like a country. I think of a country as a person, and a country can lose pieces of itself, lose pieces of a kind of democracy based on a system of consensus and compassion. And a family can lose pieces of itself with tragedies, with injustice, with what people go through even just to walk out on the street, and then just to go through there every day, as someone who is different, who has a different color of skin or culture, and or so on. So at some point we have to it's important to remember who we really are, and to drink in the beauty and to be there for each other. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth, gathering essence of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way. So there may be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, or other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces, in tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after having been lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place to go. Make a giveaway and remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark. So the Muskogee, I'm a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, and the Muskogee people, our trickster figure, almost every culture has trickster figures or clowns. Ours is rabbit. So we have all these trophy or rabbit stories. Of, and rabbits always doing things that, show the worst of human behavior so we could see ourselves. And, we have tricksters. Usually there are clowns, tricksters that are, their official role is to, often in a lot of societies, is to sit near the seat of power. And that's so that the person wielding power doesn't forget that the power does not belong to them. It's to be used for the good of everyone. And sometimes what happens is, in the strangest of times, the trickster winds up sitting in the seat of power. Rabbit is up to tricks. In a world long before this one, there was enough for everyone until somebody got out of line. We heard it was Rabbit, fooling around with clay in the wind. Everybody was tired of his tricks and no one would play with him, and he was lonely in this world. So Rabbit thought to make a person. And when he blew into the mouth of that crude figure to see what would happen, the clay man stood up. Rabbit showed the clay man how to steal a chicken. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal corn. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal someone else's wife, and that clay man obeyed. Rabbit felt important and powerful, and clay man felt important and powerful. And once that clay man started, he could not stop. Once he took that chicken, he wanted all the chickens. Once he took that corn, he wanted all the corn. And once he took that wife, well, he wanted all the wives. He was insatiable. Then he had a taste of gold. He wanted all the gold. Soon it was land or anything else he saw. His wanting only made him want more. Soon it was countries. Then it was trade. The wanting infected the earth. We lost track of the purpose and meaning for life. We began to forget our songs, our stories. We could no longer see or hear our ancestors or talk with each other across the kitchen table. Forests were being mowed down all over the world to make more, and Rabbit had no place to play. Rabbit's trick had backfired. Rabbit tried to call that clay man back, but when the clay man wouldn't listen, Rabbit realized he'd made a clay man with no ears. It's funny, I wrote this a little while back before earbuds. But there's something to it, everybody attached to their equipment and how much listening is really going on. And I'm speaking about myself too. I'm including myself in that. Poetry teaches me how to listen. Let's see. This morning, I pray for my enemies. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not my furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend. This next poem is how to write a poem in a time of war. I kind of have a poem about how to write a poem. It's called an Ars Poetica, how to break my heart. But this, my last book of poetry, I have 9 books of poetry. An American Sunrise, I wrote, I was down in Tennessee, just down the road. And I'd taken the job there teaching at UTK, and I loved it there. I didn't want to leave. I mean, I loved the faculty, the staff, my students. Some of the students helped me, and the native poet editors put together a major Norton anthology of poetry. And we were in our homelands. My Manawa used to, and his soldiers used to, that Tennessee River was like I-40. And that's how people, it was a major highway, and they'd come up to Knoxville to steal horses. Although and I know where he stood. My condo is right near where he and his warriors used to stand over and look down into the little village of Knoxville. And it wasn't about stealing, because those lands, they didn't cede or give up those lands yet. They were just, oh, here's horses on our lands. When I said that during my interview, I still got the job. So there was nowhere in my schedule. I had a wonderful assistant who's now running a creative writing program in a college in Missouri. Jeremy Reed. And so we would put up my schedule in my office, and I had a lot of stuff on that schedule. But there was nowhere was there a book of poetry. Well, my husband and I we went all over that. We saw places that, one of my great uncles, I saw one of his houses. He was very famous in the South, Patty Carr, and near Columbus. And they said, the historian that was taking us around said, that's one of Patty Carr's houses. And I was thinking, put that in your images of Native people. That's been the best thing about the Poet Laureateship, about one of the things about Deb Haaland being the Secretary of Interior, and I didn't finish that story yet, is that, we're human beings. It might sound big, but, we are human beings. When I first started, I was undergrad. We make a lot of important decisions when we're undergrads thinking about, and I remember thinking, okay, I'm in the middle of being an artist and then going into poetry, and my poetry's coming out of Native rights. And I thought, if my work, when I get to my last breath, my last steps here on earth, I want Native people to be seen as human beings. And that you would even have to say that is crazy, or even that you would even have to say Black Lives Matter is bizarre, that we would even come to that place where it was important and needed to be said. So I had no plans to write a book of poetry, and I knew we were leaving, and I didn't finish that. Patty Carr owned the largest horse racing, we were in horse racing country. He owned the largest horse racing track on the eastern seaboard. But he was removed too. The U.S. government came and, they wanted we weren't just hiding out in the woods, although it's a good place we should all hide out in the woods. Yeah. But, because we did that too. But, we had pianos, we had, I have horse racing track, and we were force marched. It'd be just like right now, government come into your houses right now and just force march you out of your homes. That's what happened. So we go back there. My husband's the same tribe, the same ceremonial ground, same tribal nation, and our people are gone. I mean, we have all the stories. Our stories connect to places. We can say, this is where this happened, but we're in Oklahoma. My watch is doing something weird. Yeah. So, and I thought, this is crazy. Our people fought so hard to stay, and now we're getting ready to go back to Oklahoma, and we're leaving this place and we're excited about going back to the place they did not want to go to. What do you do with that? What do you do with contradictions? Some of us eat too much. Some of us drink too much. Some of us write poetry as a way to confront. It's important to open your eyes and your ears. And as difficult as it is, it's important to know the stories. not for blame or judgment, but for understanding so we can move forward. Anyway, my spirit, this was the first poem of the book that I wasn't planning to write, called An American Sunrise. And it starts with a question because I went outside and my spirit asked, knowing I was going to leave and feeling that contradiction, and my spirit asked me, well, what did you learn here? And I thought, where in the world do any of us begin with history? Where do we start? You know, where do we start? Where does it start? You know, the origin of story of this country was violent and racist, and yet there were some really fine principles and principled people. You know, where do we start, and how do we, and beyond that, we're moving forward. How do we move forward in a way that everyone's story has a place? How to write a poem in a time of war. There are also twin baby girls that I saw them when the Syrian people were being bombed, and I included them in here. How to write a poem in a time of war. You can't begin just anywhere. There's two voices here. You can't begin just anywhere. It's a wreck. Shrapnel in the eye of a house, a row of houses. There's a rat scrambling from light with fleshy trash in its mouth, a baby strapped to its mother's back, cut loose. Soldiers crawl the city, the river, the town, the village, the bedroom, our kitchen. They eat everything or burn it. They kill what they cannot take. They rape what they cannot kill. They take. Rumors fall like rain, like bombs, like mother and father tears swallowed for restless peace, like sunset slanting toward a moonless midnight, like a train blown free of its destination, like a seed fallen where there is no chance of trees or any place for birds to live. No, start here. Deer appear from the edge of the woods. We used to see woodpeckers the size of the sun and were greeted by chickadees with their good morning songs. We started to cook outside, slippery with dew and laughter. Ah, these smoky, sweet sunrises. We tried to pretend war wasn't going to happen, though they began building their houses all around us and demanding more. They started teaching our children their God story. No, not here. You can't begin here. This is memory shredded because it is impossible to hold with words, even poetry. These memories were left here by the trees. The torn pocket of your daughter's hand-sewn dress, the sash, the lace, the baby's delicately beaded moccasin still connected to the foot, a young man's note of promise to his beloved. No, this is not the best place to begin. Everyone was asleep despite the distant bombs. Terror had become the familiar stranger. Our beloved twin girls curled up in their nightgowns next to their father and me. If we begin here, none of us will make it to the end of the story, of the poem. Someone has to make it out alive, sang a grandfather to his grandson, his granddaughter, as he blew his most powerful song into the hearts of the children. There, it would be hidden from the soldiers who would take them miles, rivers, mountains from the naval cord, place of the origin story. He knew one day, far day, the grandchildren would return. Generations later, over slick highways constructed over old trails, through walls of laws meant to hamper or destroy, over stones bearing libraries of the winds, he sang us back to our home place from which we were stolen in these smoky green hills. Yes, begin here. So I didn't know where the poem was going. I don't know, otherwise it ruins it. It's about discovery. And I've been asked several times about my music because I play mainly saxophone and so on. And there's something about it's patterning and rhythm. And every time I read this, rumors fall, I feel like I'm even writing it like I was improvising. Rumors fall like rain, like bombs, like mother and father tears swallowed for restless peace. peace, like sunset slanting toward a moonless midnight. I can play that on the saxophone. Like a train blown free of its, I could play it on my flute. Like a train blown free of its destination, like a seed fallen where there is no chance of trees or for, anything else. And so on and so on. It's all related. Let's see. I was going to read, I have a tobacco story. It's kind of a tobacco origin story. This was told to me by my cousin, George Kozer Jr. See, Manawi had several wives. People didn't. People had, died a lot then, or children. There were so many children born and died. And the wife before my grandmother, great grandmother, and my cousin George Kozer, it's because my cousin. Anyway, they were killed at Battle of Horseshoe Bend. He had a wife and family killed at Battle of Horseshoe Bend, and so Betsy Kozer was our grandmother. Well, my cousin George Kozer Jr. is kind of my go-to. He knows a lot. He's a good storyteller, and I learn a lot from him. He shares. Not everybody is generous with sharing, but he's like that, and so people always go to him. And he told me about the origin story of tobacco, that it was a young couple, their first love, and they go out and they make love, and they give birth. The birth out of the ground is a tobacco, the first tobacco plant. So this is tobacco origin story, and it happened not too far from here. And I wrote the poem in 7 syllables, 11, 7, 11, 7, 11. I don't know that you'll hear that, but tobacco origin story. It was way back before there was a way back, when time threaded earth and sky. Children were conceived, were born, grew, and walked tall in what we now call a day. Every planted thought grew plant ladders to the stars, way back before there was no way back, Miss Mary Mac. We used to sing along the buttons of her dress. Our babies are always our babies. Even back then, when time waved through the corn, we knew our plants like relatives. Their stories were our stories. There were songs for everything then, for every transformation. From that first couple, a young Muskogee man and woman who walked through the shimmer of the early evening, they had become as one song. They lay down when it was dark. I can hear their intimate low voice talking, how they tease each other with such gut love. Earth makes a bed with pillow mounds, and it is there as the night insects sing they conceive their first child. They will look back as they walk east toward the sunrise. The raw stalks of beginning will drink the light, root deeply dark into earth in the tracks of their loving. The plant child emerges first, the seed head, then leafy long male body, and the white female flowers of tobacco, or hedgie, as the people called it when it called to them. Come here, we were brought to you from those who love you. We will help you. And that's how it began, way back when we knew how to hear the songs of plants and could sing back like now on paper with marks like bird feet. But where are our ears? They have grown to fit around earbuds to hear music made for cold cash, like our beloved smoke making, threaded with addiction and dead words. Sing this song back to me, girl. In the moonlight, tobacco plant had silver moon buttons all up her back. We're getting dressed to go plant new songs with words. Our sun is dimming faster. Mado, hedgie, mado, hasi, mado, gana jaga, mado, ah. I'm going to read the next poem for Lindsay. We were talking about birds. And birds are messengers. That's how we understand birds. Not all of them are. Some are just going about their business, they're not all like eagles. Can be great. They're not all. Some are messengers, and some, some not. And I guess I'll start. She talked about robins, and I have a connection with robins ever since I eventually moved back home, and I bought my sister's place, and there were, I'd go back there to Oklahoma, and I would see this one robin family. There were several generations, so that by the time I moved there, after they'd been there 30 years, how many generations of robins would that be? And I remember one day I saw that robin, and that robin asked me, who are you? Because I was somebody different. I said, I'm her sister, the one who lived here. So he was fine with that. And I've noticed there's always one robin that's the messenger, and you'll hear them, and they're just carrying on. They're giving out all the news and telling everybody what's going on. Some of them are gossips. And anyway, he was the one to do that, and he was always watching me. I would go out. So I started going out in the morning and playing my flute as a kind of a blessing and asking for, I would do my prayers that way and kind of sing them. And he was out there really watching me. Then he went and told all the birds that I was a strange bird human. And when I moved there, when I married my husband and moved into his place in Tulsa, I missed that bird. I missed him. I missed all the birds there. And one morning, it was almost hurting. I was missing him. And I opened the front door, and there were like 50 robins out there. So that little story's for Lindsay. And I'm going to read this poem, Redbird Love. It's a love poem. And there's different ways. One time I had students, and I write there's so many cliches with love poems. And we had a whole classroom with blackboards all the way around. I like the idea there being blackbirds that's how poems happen. If I were writing a poem, I would say there were blackbirds all the way around. And so we thought all of the words, all of the cliches, everything used in a love poem. And then I told them, okay, write a love poem. And they were all groaned. And of course, they found other ones we missed. And but this is one, and it's a poem about watching. This when we were living in Knoxville, and we had all these birds, and we watched for a couple of generations this cardinal and this young female, really pretty. We watched her whole courtship. And let's see, I have it in here. I have it in this other manuscript here. Here it is, Redbird Love. So it's a love story too. Redbird Love. We watched her grow up. She was the urgent chirper, fledgling flyer. And when spring rolled out its green, she'd grown into the most noticeable bird girl, long-legged and just the right amount of blush tipping her wings, crest, and tail, and she knew it in the bird parade. We watched her strut. She owned her stuff. The males perked their armor, greased their wings, and flew skyloop missions to show off for her. In the end, there was only one. There's that one you circle back to for home. This morning, the young couple scavenged seeds on the patio. She is thickening with eggs. Their minds are busy with sticks the perfect size, tufts of fluff like dandelion and other pieces of soft. He steps aside for her so she can eat. Then we watch him fill his beak, walk tenderly to her and kiss her with seed. The sacred world lifts up its head to notice we are double, triple blessed. Thank you. I know I am supposed to leave time for Q&A, so I guess I'll read one more. I'm going to try this one. This one I wrote, it was March, right after everything had shut down. And I was looking outside. It was kind of nice not to have all the traffic, but it was scary. It was quiet. And I think we all realized how much we needed that, even as we were terrified and didn't know what would happen. And this is called How Love Blows Through the Trees. I was looking out at the trees, and that's another story, the tree people. When I was at Wake Forest, about a month ago, I dreamed this tree. It was one of those wide awake dreams. And the tree talked to me, and it bent down, and I was walking across from that hotel, and I saw the tree in my dream. So they know things. How love blows through the trees. And I was thinking about a grandfather. This Oak Creek town appears empty except for the trees. and the story of how wind will come to clean the earth, of the takers who took and never give back. One day, my grandfather used to sing, a fresh world will rise up to take the place of a society that didn't love the earth. We lost ourselves when we crossed that river, my grandfather used to say. He would smoke to the east, northwest, and south, touch the earth and sky. He'd be standing in the kitchen, there'd be no one listening. Pass this love on, he'd say. It knows how to bend, it will never break. It's the only thing with a give and take. The more it's used, the more it makes. My grandfather flew like smoke to the sky side of earth. He left us here in this place he blessed. What stories he carried, what laughter wrapped memory. Now I'm standing in the kitchen and I can hear him singing. Sometimes it takes a while for us to hear. Pass this love on, he'd say. It knows how to bend, it will never break. It's the only thing with a give and take. The more it's used, the more it makes. That love is a bridge that will cross the river home. He'd be standing in the dark with no one listening. How time blows steadily through the city, the trees. Sing to this earth, sing, he sang. Pass this love on, he'd say. It knows how to bend, it will never break. Okay. Thank you. Well, I changed key a little bit. I hadn't sung it a cappella before. So, okay. Yeah, I guess it's time for Q&A. But see, I have more questions. You know, I think I'm like, poets are a lot, I often sit with mathematicians when I'm at, at mixed gatherings, so to speak. And I wind up with all these different, scientists, art, literature, et cetera. But it's because math, I think of the mathematicians and poets very similar in the sense that we are working, abstractly, even as we work concretely towards certain kinds of solutions. A solution might be momentary, or it might fix a certain place in a pattern. But and scientists too, we're all trying to figure out what we're doing here, where we've been, where we're going. What does it mean? Does it mean everything? Does it mean anything? And so on.
Thank you, Ms. Harjo. Thank you so much for sharing your poetry and your warm reflections with us this evening. Hello, everyone. I'm Jean Rebecca Thomas of this university. I'm particularly charmed by the discussion of mathematics. As a computer scientist, I consider myself essentially a mathematician, so I'm happy we're sharing a stage. It's my privilege to open up this next portion of the event. Ms. Harjo has graciously agreed to field your questions, and so we're ready to accept them. Please text your question to the number on the card you received if you're here. For those watching at home, the number is 859-429-1452. I will relay the questions to Ms. Harjo as they come in. And I have a question for you. How does writing a poem begin for you? With an image, a word, an idea, a sound, or something else? And then how do you take that to fruition? How do you know when the poem is finished?
Yeah, they're all different. Like I was saying that how to write a poem in a time of war, I could hear my spirit, saying, what did you learn here? And then the first thing I wrote down was like, where do you start? Like where do you start how do you explain evil? Where, I have a character who I always learn something, and one of the characters in my play, Wings of Night Sky, Wings of Morning Light, the spirit helper, she said something that really helped me. She said, some things take an eternity to understand. So, but they're all different. Sometimes it is, I'm very rhythmic. I'm always drumming away, or, I'm rhythm oriented. Everybody's kind of different. I'm also image driven. My earliest poems were like driven with one image, pretty much singular image driven. And then it kind of shifted because I came to poetry out of being a painter, and I'm going back to painting after I'm traveling a lot right now, but I've got a studio and I'm going to start painting again. I won't give up poetry. You know what I would like to do is to paint my poems. I think some of them make good, cool paintings. I can see all the images in that, how to, I'm sketching these paintings out. You got to help me because I lose track of the question. The question was about each poem. So they start differently. Sometimes it's what I heard somebody say. Sometimes it's an ache. Sometimes I know that I'm going to write a poem some days when I just can't, there's a tremendous angst. It's interesting. Yeah, it often happens when there's some kind of angst or something, and that's the only way it can be resolved. The only way I go in there to travel around and to see what would happen. And that's the part of scientific discovery of creative artists, whether you're a dancer, a novelist, a poet, is that you go in, you have all of your tools and your craft, but you don't always know what you might have a place you're going towards, but it's important to be open to what might happen. And, that's the process. I was heading somewhere else with it, but it'll come back to me. Sorry, I'm jet lagging times 3 or 4 weeks. So.
Yeah, I think that was great, and maybe it's a good then jumping off point for this next question. You mentioned having the realization that you were writing a book. How does this realization happen for you? Do you approach book writing already knowing what it will be about, or does a book naturally come to you?
Again, they're all different. An American Sunrise, it was just shot right out. I mean, I worked it, and I revise things. They don't just happen. And some I tweak even after they're published. Not all of them, but the ones that I read out loud a lot or perform a lot, I can hear how they can be better. Especially when you take them to orality from the page, they shift some. But conflict resolution for holy beings, I don't know how. This one, I was really playing with the idea of conflict resolution for one, when it seems impossible, and also played with doing riffs. I like some of the little riffs in here, which are like poetic. I think of them as musical moments in the middle of everything. And I was going to read one of my favorites. When I walk over to join you in the TwoStep, you'd better say yes, the old woman told Death. Death laughed. For her, Death was a fine-looking native man. He wore old-style buckskin. She took his arm. He was a good dancer. They two-stepped all the way to the end of the circle of the earth's fire. There's another one, is Midnight. I won't. But anyway, they're all different. Sometimes I don't know that I'm writing a book. I just write poems, and then they all start to come together. That's usually kind of what happens. But once I get something, and then I start working out from there and writing. But things will surprise you, like I'm writing away on this book and research. Poets research. They're always studying and researching. I did a lot of historical research for An American Sunrise. And in the middle of it, this poem, Washing My Mother's Body, just, it wasn't even that part of the family I was writing about. And then here she is in this poem that belonged there. It somehow fit.
Maybe to pick up on something you just said about being surprised. One of our viewers wants to know, what are a couple of things that surprised you about being Poet Laureate and what you have learned?
One, that I became Poet Laureate. I don't know. You can't predict those kinds of things. I do what I've been doing for years, and there's been many years where, you know, you go through and you do what you do and nobody seems to notice, but you come to the realization you do it because you love what you do. And I've always been blessed with an audience. But what I think one thing that has been, one, that it was so visible. I figured, who pays attention to poetry? But this is a very visible position, I learned. And you have to be careful what you say, but it ends the end of April. No. And two, what a doorway it was. And then I can finish the Deb Holland story here. What a doorway it was for the images of Native people. I keep thinking about me saying that I want people to see us as human beings. It's where there's poets, that makes you a human being. And that's why my Poet Laureate project was Living Nations, Living Words, to show that there are many living Native poets. And that my term is also at a time when people have turned towards poetry because of everything going on, and poetry steps up to be in the place that it was, where it functions, that place is a transformation, even if it's a small transformation of watching, a crocus emerge, or a war or loss or grief. We lost so many people to COVID in our community. But to get back to the images of natives, when my grandmother played saxophone in Indian Territory, Naomi Harjo, I didn't know that till after I'd started playing sax, and my uncle says, we might have her saxophone around here somewhere. I really was hoping he would find it. But Deb Holland, yes, she writes poetry. And she came into my class when I was teaching an undergrad class at the University of New Mexico, and she came in with a motorcycle helmet, student, and I was real curious about her motorcycle, and that you didn't often see very many students, period, but young female students and young Native woman student come in. And she said, well, I want to save on fossil fuels. That's Deb. She always, I taught her later at UCLA, and she's always had that passion to be involved in community and to care for the land and, and the people, all the different kinds of people, the animal people, plant people.
We have many questions coming in, so I'm going to combine two questions together. Starting a work of art can be scary. Do you ever experience any hesitation before starting a piece? If so, how do you move forward? And do you ever reject a piece?
Oh yeah, I'm going through that right now. Yeah, I'm supposed to be, well, it's hard. I'm supposed to be working on this musical play. And sometimes I make it too huge. So what I do is I make it smaller. Think, okay, I'll do one paragraph. I'll do one character thing. That's what you have to do. Otherwise it can be too much. Or if you think about, well, I'm going to write a novel, which seems like or even writing a poem, well, then you can put one word down, 2 words, a phrase, play it musically, do phrases, and then throw them all and put them all in a different order. That's the thing I don't want to write what I've heard before. I mean, we all have the same kind of stories. There's story, I've seen those lists of, all stories, are about this, there's only so many. But we have different approaches and different music in us and different voices and so on. But yeah, it's to start small, and sometimes it's even hard to start. But once you take a step, and it's tricking yourself into taking that step, I find once I get going, I'm fine. It's just cutting the mind. It seems a lot of it about the mind. You know, in athletics, I was never an athlete, but when I was 50, I moved to Hawaii and started racing outrigger canoes. And I realized everybody thought I was out there teaching. No, I wasn't. Yeah, I was in the water. But, you know, it's, see, now I'm trying to connect what I was just saying about the water and the rhythm. Oh, and the athleticism. And I had never been an athlete before and never had any intention. But there I was. And it taught me a lot about the mind. And if I was stroking, the stroker is in the front of the canoe. The boat's going to go where you look. You're called the eyes or the maka of the canoe. You're the eyes of the canoe. And everybody is the eyes of the canoe of their own story. So your story or your writing dilemma, you know, or whatever, is going to go where you turn it. You know, if you're always negative about everything, it's just going to, you know, you're going to sit in a canoe and just go in a circle. If you have something, you can sit there and think, okay, you know what I do to get past that? I just start writing anything, like a journal. I use a lot of journals. I use journals really just to take off and find out what's going on and I find poems that way. I find stories. I stick images in them, quotes. I read a lot. I put quotes in there. I listen to music. And in a sense, sometimes then you just go pick all those journals up and then you've got stuff. That's another part, is that you have to feed your mind. Feed it something nourishing, you know, not Life of the Kardashians. But yeah, you know, there's things, I've never watched that actually, but I've watched other things that are just as bad. But sometimes we do that just to go, it's like eating Lucky Charms or something. It's true, because your mind needs other kinds of nourishment for it to expand and find fresh places to share, because it's all about sharing too. So like you got to feed your spirit. Well, you feed your spirit by being outside in the real world, by going outside your comfort zone, by helping poets in Ukraine. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to feed your spirit. And that's all part of it too.
Thank you. One last question, and I'll circle back to the beginning of the evening. Will you tell us more about the song that you played for us at the beginning?
Oh, I just improvised that. It's a native flute. And I just, like I was saying, I was just thinking of flying over and landing in this beautiful land here and the peoples, and how much I can see how the original people and the people here love this place so much. They love the lands here. It's so beautiful. And so I was thinking about all of that. And I just made that song up, improvised it. I love jazz, and John Coltrane is one of my poetry saxophone ancestors. And but I learned how to really improvise I went to India with several American poets, including Yusuf Komunyakaa and Carolyn Forche and others. And it was the biggest book fair. It's the biggest book fair in the world in Calcutta, India. And that year there was a fight. The committee's members got into a fight and they canceled it. And it was huge news because it was gigantic. So then they were wondering, the sponsors, well, what do we do with these American poets? So they started taking us around to read in all kinds of situations. And once they heard my sax, because the first time I read, I played my saxophone, they loved it. So they had me playing at everything. They would just say, okay, come up here and then play something that's like this. So I did. I got into trouble once, though, because there were these players of traditional music, and they have very different, and it wasn't just the usual, the classic forms that a lot of us hear, but it was tribal people from the area, and the music was really interesting with the scales and the beats. The beats were different. And they dragged me by my arm to play with them, and I kept saying no, and I sat down pretty quick because I didn't know the music. Now I know what I would do. I would have just played one note. I would find one note that fit, and I would have played it really well.
Thank you. Well, I would like to show you our appreciation by presenting you with a traditional Transylvania University keepsake, an engraved julep cup. We hope you'll enjoy it.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us and for engaging with us and taking our questions. Please, let's thank Ms. Harjo one last time. This concludes our 2022 William R. Keenan Jr. Lecture. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a lovely evening.
And I'm sorry I'm not signing books because of the COVID thing, but I did